Hey everybody, so today I want to talk to you about my experience on the Uinta Highline Trail. So first I want to start off by saying the Uinta Highline Trail is something that I've been wanting to do since I moved to Utah back in November. Since the Uintas have such a short hiking season, I've been thinking about this trip for like the past 8 months. And so on July 16, 2022, I set out to hike the Uinta Highline Trail from Leedy Peak all the way to the western terminus at Hayden Pass. The route I selected was just around 86 miles, I think, and it skipped the first 20 miles of the trail because whenever I contacted the Ashley National Forest Ranger, she said that section of the trail was extremely dry this year and all the spring runoff was gone, and I kind of just wanted to get right into the high Uintas. So with that being said, I had my wife drop me off at the trailhead and I set up camp there for the first night. The setup at the trailhead was extremely nice and there was several established campsites and fire rings, so I had a really comfortable stay on the first night. And I want to say the temperature during the day was somewhere around 80 or in the 80s, and it got down to 44 degrees that night, so it was pretty chilly and those pretty drastic temperature swings. But it wasn't anything that I wasn't prepared for because I had my sleeping bag along with the down blanket that I supplement in my sleeping bag, so I slept pretty comfortable on that first night. I did end up getting into my merino wool thermals that morning because when it was time to pack up my campsite, it was pretty chilly in the morning. But as soon as I got my campsite packed up, I ditched the thermals and got into my shorts, and it warmed up pretty quick when I started hiking. So on that first day, I hiked from Leedy Peak to Chipeta Lake, and I covered roughly around 15 miles. And I would say for that section of the trail, the first half of the trail was marked extremely well. And generally speaking, the whole trail was really easy to follow. And the second half of that day, there were tons of blowdowns and a lot of water all over the trail, so it was a little bit difficult to navigate at times. One of the big things that helped me was looking down at the ground and seeing horse tracks and other indications of people passing through that same area. But there were large sections of that trail where there was no well-beaten path and you were kind of just navigating through what I would call grassy boulder fields. And occasionally you would see things like horse poop or other signs of people passing through there, and you would kind of know you were on the right trail. And there was a large section of the second half of that trail where I was following gigantic cairns that were pretty good. So I would say just by and large, the whole trail for that first day was extremely easy to follow. So in between Leedy Peak and Chipeta Lake, there are two big passes that you have to cross. I'm not completely sure the name of these passes, but the first one goes next to Mount Unterman, and it's right next to Lake Wild. And the second one being past Dead Man Lake, and I think people generally call that Dead Man Pass, but I'm not 100% sure. Generally speaking, for this part of the trail, there was tons of water, so I didn't really have to worry about anything like that. And I would say the hiking was moderately difficult. There was a couple of really tough sections where I had to hike a little bit slower. Great views everywhere. It's beautiful country out there. And I was really excited because it was everything I was hoping for, and really you didn't see a ton of people. I met a few people at the Leedy Peak trailhead that were doing the same thing I was, but when I separated from those people first thing in the morning, I didn't really see anybody for the rest of the day. So I would say as far as a true backcountry experience, this trail was excellent. Now I want to get into the challenges I had on this first day. So as many of you know, I packed some knee braces because I'd been having some knee issues from Mount Olympus, which I hiked about 3 weeks prior to the Uinta Highline Trail, and those ended up becoming crucial throughout my first day. Like I alluded to earlier, I was hiking through these grassy boulder fields all day, and the issue with that being there wasn't a lot of level footing for me to be stepping on, and it lasted for miles and miles and miles of just uneven footing. And at one point, about halfway through the day, I was stepping on some small, I would say grapefruit-sized boulders, and my foot went a little bit crooked, and I felt like somebody hit me in the side of the knee with a knife. It was extremely painful, and it made me stop for a while, and that's when I put on my knee compression sleeves, or my knee braces, whatever you want to call them. So in the middle of a 15-mile day, probably 7 or so miles in, I started having knee issues already. Once I put on those knee braces, I started to feel a lot better, so I was kind of like, yeah, I think I'll be okay, The knee pain wasn't too bad outside of that one stabbing pain, but I was still, once I gave it a little bit of a rest, I was still able to hike further. So I just assumed that once I put on the braces, I would be okay. And also, I should say, I had made it around Leedy Peak, but I hadn't made it over that first pass next to Lake Wild yet. But that's kind of what I was looking at when I was putting on the braces is, hey, this pass is coming up and this is the next big thing I got to do. So after I put on the braces, I had given it a little bit of break, ate some food, drank some electrolytes, and I was on my way to the pass behind this other lady. So as I was sitting there, she had mentioned to me that there was two ways to go up this pass. One was more of a direct, really steep route, and one kind of went up and around the lake and was a more gradual elevation gain. And she said she was conflicted on which way to take, but she decided to go straight up the pass. And considering my knee pain I was having, I decided to take the more gradual route. And that proved to be a little bit challenging because as I got to the center of the pass, there was a giant snowfield that this trail led right to. And the trail kind of stopped at the snowfield. The snowfield was still melting and there was like miniature streams coming off it at the bottom, but the trail was completely interrupted by that snowfield. Once I hit that snowfield, I realized that if I turned around and went back up, I probably wasn't going to make it. So what I ended up doing was kind of shimmying on the rocks around the bottom of the snowfield, and I connected with the trail that she had taken. And you have to hike on the snow just a little bit, but that got me up and over that first pass. Needless to say, that slowed me down quite a bit on that first day already, and I was starting to feel a little bit of knee pain. So those last 2 miles were pretty tough. So in between the pass at Lake Wild and the pass at Dead Man Lake, that was a pretty brutal section for my knees because I was constantly getting that uneven footing I've been talking about and passing through these grassy boulder fields. And by the time I got to Dead Man Lake to do that pass, my knees were pretty much shot. So I gave it another break at Dead Man Lake, and then I started up the pass. And when I got to the top of that pass, I was pretty much limping at that point, and I knew I still had around, I believe it was around 5 miles or so. I had to go around White Rocks Lake to get to Chipeta Lake, and it was still a pretty long section. Up to this point, it had been pretty wide open hiking, and the section between the pass at Dead Man Lake and Chipeta Lake is extremely what I would consider like marshy almost. You're hiking a lot in several inches of water, there's a lot of streams, it's very mushy ground, and there's tons of blowdowns. You're kind of going from section of trees to meadow to trees to meadow, and in between the sections of trees there's just standing water. And that's kind of another thing that attributed to some knee pain to me, is that really squishy ground still doesn't lend you to a lot of solid footing. So my knees were really just taking a beating all day. And I think in hindsight, coming down from Mount Olympus, it's like 4,000 feet over 4 miles, I believe. So it's 1,000 feet a mile straight down, super steep. And when I was done with Mount Olympus, I had had a lot of knee pain for a few weeks, and I thought I had enough time to heal for those 3 weeks between Mount Olympus and the Uinta Highline Trail, because I felt great when I got on the trail, no problem at all. I just think in general I didn't have enough time to heal, and in hindsight I really wish I would have taken the descent from Mount Olympus a lot slower and paid a little bit more attention to how tough I was being on my knees, because I think that really played into how miserable the second half of my day was on this first day on the Uinta Highline Trail. So during this section of the trail, I was pretty much limping and trying to get over blowdowns and navigate around the trail. And I was moving almost at a snail's pace. It was extremely painful and extremely slow. And I kind of knew that I had to make it to Chipeta Lake before those late night thunderstorms kicked in. So I was trying to move as fast as I could, but I ended up getting caught in a thunderstorm in one patch of trees before, I think it was a couple miles before Chipeta Lake. And I was sitting there looking up like, man, I'm moving way too slow for this to be my first day on the trail. I kind of knew that more than likely my time on the Uinta Highline Trail was already going to come to an end. And it was really tough for me mentally because I had built up so much anticipation for this trail that it was really disheartening to make that decision that I was going to have to get off the trail. But I knew that if this kept up and it didn't get any better, which it wasn't getting any better because I was hiking on bad knees already, that I was just going to have to call it. And also knowing that the hiking season in the Uintas is really short, I knew that once I got off trail, that was going to be it for at least the next year. So that was a really tough decision in my mind to have to make. The other big thing about making this decision is that my gear, my food, my pack, everything that I had taken with me and all of the planning I had done was working out just as I anticipated. Everything was going great. It was beautiful out there. It was exactly how I expected it to be. The late evening thunderstorm that I got caught in was, I mean, it was kind of just part of the experience for me. It was exactly what I anticipated. I didn't have any catastrophic gear failures. My food, as far as calories went, it seemed like I was right on pace. When I got caught in the thunderstorm, I threw on my rain jacket. It started pouring rain. I kind of hunkered down in a group of trees. There was some lightning it seemed to be in the direction of Chipeta Lake, and the storm was kind of moving towards me a bit, so I stayed in the trees for a little while, and I waited out the thunderstorm, and that seemed to go well. So I was just generally really excited to be there. The only thing that was preventing me from going any further was my knees, and having to hike 7 or so miles with the thought in your mind that something that's completely out of your control is what's going to stop you from doing something that you've been wanting to do for a long time, it was really disheartening to me. So that was something that I had to kind of deal with walking to Chipeta Lake. Once I got to Chipeta Lake, like I said, I was really moving at a snail's pace, and by that last mile or so, I knew without a shadow of a doubt I was just going to have to call it. So I used my Garmin InReach to text my wife, and I told her, hey, I'm going to give it till the morning. I'm going to take some ibuprofen. I'm going to give it till the morning. But if I don't feel 75% better by the morning, I'm not going to be able to do this trail, because Chipeta Lake is it's the last place where the road meets the trail. So once you pass Chipeta Lake, it gets way more difficult to get off trail, and it usually ends up in a 7-8 mile hike just to get off the trail. Sometimes a 14 mile or 10 mile hike to get off the trail from that point. So Chipeta Lake was really a good area to get picked up anyways. That night, I set up my tent at Chipeta Lake. There was a little field there, and there's a tiny hill you have to go down to get to this little field I wanted to set up in. And even that tiny little hill, I mean, it was, 5 feet down. It wasn't really anything crazy, but it was pretty steep. Just going down that tiny little elevation just killed my knees. And so I was in pretty rough shape by the time I set up my tent that night. I crawled into bed at night, and laying on my sleeping pad, I had to lay on my back, because anytime I rolled onto my sides, either side, just that little bit of pressure on my knees pretty much made me yell out in pain. I mean, it was extremely painful, the most pain I've ever felt in my knees in my life. So I tried laying on my side for a little while, and as soon as I rolled over, it was too painful. So even just rolling back to my back was extremely painful. I knew at that moment when I was laying in my tent, I was like, yeah, there's no way, even if I felt, quite a bit better tomorrow morning, there's just no way I'm going to be able to finish this trail. So I texted my wife again and was like, yeah, definitely plan on picking me up first thing in the morning, because I'm going to have to get off this trail. The next morning comes, and I took some more ibuprofen, and I was able to, with the ibuprofen, it reduced the inflammation enough to where I was able to kind of walk around a little bit, still moving extremely slow. But as long as I avoided the boulders and kept on some relatively flat footing, I was doing pretty good. Once I warmed up my knees in the morning, I kind of thought in the back of my head, I was like, maybe I should just take some more ibuprofen and just try and keep going. In the back of my head, I knew realistically that it would never work, And so, but there's always that thought in the back of your mind, because it's something that I want to do so bad that it was just a tough decision all the way around. And so really disappointing that I had to get off after 2 nights, or one day effectively, one 15-mile day on the Uinta Highline Trail. Speaking to that too, I was doing exactly the pace I wanted to be doing, and if really, if it hadn't have been for my knees, I was making better time than I anticipated. So it was just, I mean, that was one of the hardest things, is that everything that was in my control, all the planning that went into it, had been working out perfectly. So it was really just my knees that took me out. So the next morning, my wife drives in to pick me up from Chipeta Lake, and I go home. And so in the following days, my knees are still in a lot of pain, and I don't really know what's wrong with my knees in particular, but I know that specifically with my left knee, I know that a lot of times when I extend my leg, I get a lot of popping and crunching in that knee, and I had a lot of what I would consider, I think, muscle pain around both of my knees. So both of my knees had a lot of issues, but specifically my left knee had a lot of popping and crunching. So I know something's wrong in there. And so since then, obviously I gave it a lot of rest for the following week or so. And then I went to a doctor, and he kind of recommended that we could do some x-rays just to see if anything would come up on x-ray. And then probably after that was going to be either physical therapy or an MRI. And so I did the x-rays, and nothing came back on the x-ray, which is kind of what I anticipated. And I assumed that this was probably going to end in some kind of physical therapy. I don't really know if it's really tough, because I don't really know how much just giving my knee the appropriate time to heal will do versus going straight into something like physical therapy or an MRI situation. Like I said, I'm pretty sure there's something physically wrong in there, but I kind of want to give it a little bit of time before I jump straight into that, because I'm not really good at staying off the trail or staying home or staying off my legs. I live on the third floor of my apartment. At work, we have stairs. I'm standing all day, constantly walking. So just in general, I'm an extremely active person. I like to get out, and even if it's in the city or in the town I live in, walk around. And so I'm always moving. So going forward from this point, after those x-rays, I think the first thing I'm going to do is give myself some actual time to stay off the trail and really see how much my knees improve just by giving myself some time. And like I said, this is already extremely hard because I have a lot of plans, a lot of peaks I want to climb around here. I've made a lot of plans hiking and backpacking wise for myself that I've anticipated during this summer season. Things that I'm not really comfortable doing in the wintertime, because I don't do ice axing or anything like that. Even snowshoeing is foreign to me. I would like to get into some snowshoeing, but as far as getting to the top of some of these really rocky peaks, you can't just go to these peaks during the wintertime, because they're covered in ice and it's a whole different ball game. So it's taken a lot for me to come to the decision that I'm pretty much going to have to sit out on a lot of my plans that I've made for myself this year. This whole experience for me, after getting off the Uinta Highline Trail, has been pretty mentally taxing. And on top of that, I hope that this video is doing this situation justice, and I hope my story is making sense to you guys, because this isn't really doing these types of videos or vlogs or making videos just in general is not really my forte, I guess. I'm a hiker and backpacker first, and the YouTube stuff and the videos have kind of come after that, just because I realized that I'm always in these beautiful places, and why not record them and share them with other people. So this YouTube thing has kind of come as a result of hiking and backpacking. So it's something I'm working on, and I'm trying to get better at conveying my message on camera and sharing my experiences with you guys. Even if you look back at whenever I started YouTube, you can see that most of my videos were more just shots of nature, where I was at, and kind of, there wasn't a lot of third person stuff in there. There wasn't a lot of me talking on camera. So it's something I'm working at, and I hope this video really comes through and does this whole situation justice and lets you guys understand kind of where I'm at mentally, and kind of gives you insight into how tough some of this stuff can be on people that are really passionate about the outdoors. For me, the outdoors is my life. Over the years, it's just really become a necessity for me to be outdoors. And I will be releasing a video of that, my experience on the trail, more of a montage style video where you guys can see what I got to see. And like I said, even in that first day, it was just beautiful. It was everything that I expected. I will be back on the Uinta Highline Trail. I hope I'm back next year. I hope I can get a resolution on my knees. There's been a lot of people that have been extremely supportive to me, friends, family, and things like that have reached out to me, and they're like, hey, I know how important this was to you, but just know that, there's professional athletes out there. There's, people just in everyday life that have knee issues, and once they get resolution to that, they still go on to do these incredible things. And so, because for me, I was kind of like, is this going to be the end of hiking and backpacking for me, because there's no way I can do what I want to do without reaching high elevation. It's just going to be tough on my knees in general. So I was kind of really down about, what am I going to be able to do after this, And so a lot of people were extremely supportive in that regard, and I appreciate that, because it's, like I said, it's just been really tough for me. So I hope you guys understand, and just know that from this point forward, I'm not going to stop making YouTube videos. I'm definitely going to do a lot more gear stuff, maybe a lot more vlog stuff, probably a little bit less at this moment right now of the hiking, backpacking style videos. I'll definitely be getting back to that, and I might do some, really light, kind of flat backpacking trips and vlogs and things like that. But as far as doing, some of the peaks I want to do, or some of the more exciting backpacking trips, maybe I'll have to put those on hold a little bit. But I have a ton of information style or gear style videos that I've been wanting to make, but those have been put to the wayside because of my hiking and backpacking. So I'll be getting around to things like that. If you have any experience with knee issues, I would love to hear about them. Please leave them in the comments below. If you have any stories about, injuries on trail, or just dealing with the mental aspect of having to get off a trail and kind of remove yourself from the idea that you have to finish something, I would appreciate that insight as well, because like I said, this is all new to me, and I just really appreciate you guys for sticking with me. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Thank you.